Huh?
Someone you love is going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not this year. But at some point, the person whose voice you know better than your own will go silent forever. And when that happens, you will do something strange. You will gather other people together, dress in specific colors, carry the body somewhere, and perform a series of rituals that feel ancient. Because they are. The question is, where did any of that come from? The answer reaches back further than you can imagine. Long before churches, long before written language, long before anything you would recognize as civilization, your ancestors stood over the body of someone they loved and felt the exact same weight in their chest that you feel now. And they did something about it, something deliberate, something that tells us, across hundreds of thousands of years, exactly what kind of creature the human being really is. Archaeologist April Noel, who studies the cognitive evolution of early humans, has argued that the way a species treats its dead is one of the clearest windows into the depth of its inner life. She is right. And what that window reveals about your ancestors is not what you have been told. Start about 430,000 years ago. A cave system in northern Spain called the Cima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones. Deep inside this cave, researchers discovered the skeletal remains of at least 28 individuals, all thrown or placed into a vertical shaft in the rock. There were no signs that these people had lived or died in this cave. They were brought here. Someone carried these bodies from somewhere else, walked them into the dark, and lowered them into a pit, not scattered randomly, gathered. Among the bones was a single hand axe made from red quartzite. It was called Excalibur by the excavators because of how alone it was and how intentionally it seemed placed. No other tools, just this one object, bright and deliberate, left with the dead. This was not hygienic disposal. This was not accident. Something in the minds of the people who did this required that the dead be treated differently from the living, differently from food, differently from refuse. The dead were somewhere between the two worlds, and they needed to be acknowledged. Here is what makes this truly remarkable. The species who did this was not Homo sapiens. It was a predecessor, likely Homo heidelbergensis. The impulse to honor the dead predates your own species by hundreds of thousands of years. It is not a cultural invention. It is something far deeper than that. Move forward. Around 100,000 years ago, at a site called Kefze Cave in what is now Israel, Homo sapiens, your direct ancestors, were burying their dead in deliberate graves and placing objects alongside the bodies. A child buried with the antlers of a red deer. Red ochre powder sprinkled over the remains, the earliest known use of color in a burial context. Researcher Christopher Stringer, who has spent decades tracing the origins of modern human behavior, describes these burials as among the first hard evidence that our species had developed a symbolic understanding of death. Not just a reaction to it, but a story about it. A story. That is what separates what your ancestors were doing from what a crow does when it lingers near a fallen companion, or what an elephant does when it touches the bones of its kin. Your ancestors were not just pausing at death. They were narrating it. They were placing death inside a framework of meaning. The body goes here. The red powder goes here. The antlers go here because this child meant something, and the universe needs to know that. The red ochre is worth pausing on. Red, the color of blood, of fire, of life. Why rub a pigment, the color of living blood, onto a body that will never bleed again? Researchers like Francesco De Rico, who has studied pigment use in early humans extensively, suggest this was not decoration. It was transformation. The ochre was not making the body look like something. It was trying to do something to the body, to keep something in it, or to send something through it. Your ancestors 100,000 years ago already believed, or at least hoped, that death was not the final word. And that belief has consequences that reach all the way to your living room. Now move forward again to the Neanderthals. Your close evolutionary cousins, who overlapped with your species for tens of thousands of years and who, depending on your ancestry, contributed up to 4% of your DNA. For decades, scientists debated whether Neanderthals actually buried their dead with intention or whether the evidence was accidental. Then came Shanidar Cave in Iraq. In the 1950s and 60s, archaeologist Ralph Saliki excavated Shanidar Cave and found Neanderthal remains surrounded by large quantities of pollen. Flowers, he concluded. Someone had buried a Neanderthal with flowers. The debate raged for half a century. Skeptics argued the pollen came from burrowing rodents, not mourning relatives. But in 2020, new analysis of Shanidar Cave produced fresh evidence of intentional burial, with the body positioned carefully, the head resting in a specific orientation. Deliberate, considered. What strikes researchers most is not the flowers, it is the body position. Neanderthals were not just dumping their dead, they were arranging them, placing the limbs, orienting the head. These are acts that require you to think about the body as still mattering, even after it stops moving. That is a profound cognitive leap. You have to be able to separate the person from the body, to recognize that the body is now a different kind of thing, while still feeling that it deserves attention. Your brain does this automatically. You have been doing it your whole life without realizing it. Think about the last time you saw a body, at a funeral, in a hospital, on a screen. Something in you responded differently to that body than you would to any other object in the room. It was not just sadness. There was a particular pull toward it, a particular kind of attention. Thanatologist Thomas Lynch, who has written about death rituals across cultures, describes this as the body's gravitational field. The way the presence of a dead human exerts a force on the living that no other object does. You feel compelled to do something. You feel that inaction is wrong. That feeling is ancient. It was ancient when your ancestors painted their dead red. It was ancient when Neanderthals folded a body into the earth. It is the same feeling carried forward in your nervous system, arriving in your chest the moment you walk into a room where someone is lying still. But here is where it gets stranger. The rituals your ancestors developed around death were not just about the dead. They were about the living. Anthropologist Victor Turner spent years studying what he called liminal periods, transitional moments when a person or group is between one state and another. Death, he argued, creates a liminal zone for everyone around it. The community is suddenly between before and after. The social fabric has a hole in it, and ritual is the needle and thread. When your ancestors gathered around a body, they were doing something for themselves. The gathering said, "We are still here." The placement of objects said, "This person mattered to all of us, not just to one person." The shared performance, the colors, the words, the gestures said, "We agree about what death means." And that agreement, repeated and inherited and elaborated across generations, became culture itself. Grief is not just a feeling. It is a social event, and it has been a social event since before language existed to describe it. Consider the Denisovans, the mysterious third branch of the human family tree, known primarily from fragments of bone and teeth found in a Siberian cave. We have almost no information about their burial practices. The evidence has not survived. But we know from their DNA that they interbred with both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, forming a web of kinship across the ancient world. It is nearly certain that around their fires and inside their caves, they too stood over the still bodies of their own and felt the pull toward ritual. Because by the time all three of these groups existed, the capacity for that feeling was already old. The impulse to memorialize is not a product of religion. Religion came later. The impulse to memorialize is a product of having a mind complex enough to model the future, to understand that the person who is here will not be here again, and to find that understanding intolerable without some form of response. That is what you are doing at every funeral you attend. You are responding to the intolerable. You are performing an ancient act of cognitive resistance against the void. And here is the modern mirror. You live in an era that has largely hidden death away, in hospitals, in morgues, in funeral homes where professionals handle what your ancestors handled themselves. You rarely prepare a body. You rarely sit with it overnight, the way cultures around the world did for centuries. You have outsourced the ritual, which means you have outsourced some of the processing. Researchers like Caitlin Doughty, a mortician and death acceptance advocate, have argued that this distancing from the physical reality of death has left modern people less equipped to face it, their own and others. The ancient rituals that once allowed communities to metabolize grief together, to look at the body and accept what it meant, have been replaced by services that arrive and depart in a single afternoon. And yet the instinct remains. You still feel the need to gather, to mark the moment, to do something with your hands. People who lose someone often report feeling driven, compelled to arrange objects, to clean spaces, to cook for others. These behaviors are not random. They are the ancient script running underneath modern grief. Your nervous system is trying to perform a ritual even when the culture around it has forgotten why. Your ancestors did not invent funerals because they were superstitious. They invented them because they were human. Because the mind that is capable of loving someone is also capable of understanding that the love does not stop when the body does, and that understanding demands a response. So tonight, if you think about someone you have lost and you feel that familiar pull toward them, that wish to do something, to mark something, to not let the silence be the only answer, know that you are not alone in that feeling. You have never been alone in that feeling. It has been in your species since before your species had a name for itself. Someone you love is going to die, and when that happens, you will gather other people together, and you will do something ancient. Something your ancestors did in painted caves and rocky pits and flower-strewn graves. You will refuse to let the silence be the whole story. And in that refusal, across every border and every century, the human family recognizes itself.
See you next time.
See you next time.